Shana Tova. It's been a year, as we were discussing yesterday. It's been a lot this year. It's been a lot even just this week, but this year it has been a cosmic place of extenuating circumstances, trying to figure out somehow how to put one foot in front of the other, how to figure out the thing, how to make it work, and how to do so in ways that have integrity, that have strength, that have goodness to them, that actually connect to holiness. This matters on levels that are internal and external. You have to be thoughtful and intentional about how you show up and what kinds of actions you take in the world with other people. But we know you also have to take care of yourself somehow in the midst of everything going on. With this backdrop of the fixture of great societal, political, Jewish upheaval, how do you care for yourself? Take care of your own neshama, your own soul, in a way that's sustainable. It's like that announcement when you're flying. If the oxygen masks should so drop from the ceiling, you have to put on your own before assisting the person next to you. And to say the quiet part out loud, you aren't any help, in fact, to anyone else if you aren't okay. We're going to come back to air travel too, actually. And so perhaps intuitively you want to be strong. You want to be the tough one. If the world is in upheaval, you want and you need the fortitude to stand against it, whatever the it is. You need it personally. We need it collectively as Jews. We seek to embody a certain kind of strength. Last night we looked at some paradigms around strength within Jewish tradition, and in particular an image that we're going to turn and return to throughout the Yamim Noraim. This image of a mighty cedar tree that we saw yesterday, that we get throughout prayers, Tehillim, and biblical text. But there's this piece of Talmud that takes it in a slightly different direction. We were spending time with that a little bit in thinking about how we show up and how we live through times like these. It uses that arboreal, things that grow, plant life paradigm to talk about strength, to talk about what it means to be strong. And so the blessing it compares is one from Bil'am, may the Israelites be like this mighty cedar tree. And it compares that to a curse from a guy named Achia in the book of Kings, Achia Shiloni, who said, may God strike the Israelites just like a reed is shaken about in the wind. And the rabbis say, actually, no. That whole reed blowing in the wind business, that actually is a blessing. And it's a better blessing than that one about being like the mighty cedar tree. This conversation comes to us from Talmud, from a piece called Ta'anit, a Masechet, a tractate of Talmud that actually is about what it is you do in places of emergency, times of emergency, of urgency. I've been learning this little piece with my friend Rabbi Yair Robinson for a while now, and it's about public crisis. How do you, as a community, handle public crisis? It's not enough to pray. It's not enough to sound the shofar in alarm, but actually about how it is you might fast. See under Yom Kippur. If there's a little box in the rabbinic imagination that says break glass in case of big communal emergency, this piece is about what you would find inside. So yeah, the crucial piece is 20a and 20b, the curse that turns out to be a blessing. Achia says about the Jewish people, God will strike them as a reed is shaken, a tiny little reed planted by the shore. is shaken in the water. And Achia says this about 1,000 years before the Talmud is ever written in the first place. The rabbis say this is a blessing. And they say that for 3 reasons, this curse that Achia has laid upon the Jewish people. They say, check it out. The reed actually has shoots that regrow upward. If you cut those thin little shoots, those little thin stalks that the reed will grow, it will actually regrow them. Second, it has deep and numerous roots, so you can't uproot the thing. And third, you can blow all the winds in the world at it, and it just goes with the flow. It can't be broken in half. It sways, and when the wind subsides, as it turns out, it is as tall as it ever was. So that to me is a powerful metaphor. That to me is a powerful blessing. And I think it has interesting implications for how it is we live today as well. The sort of historical view of it, I think, may be kind of like obvious, but I'll spell it out anyway. It regrows if you cut it, has deep roots that can't be uprooted by violent wind, and it'll blow, in fact, with the wind. It'll sway with it. The rabbis of the Talmud were talking about this exilic period of antiquity from at least 1,500 years ago, and I think that they are thinking about the kind of violence that befell the Jews in the destruction of the Second Temple in the year 70. But what's interesting is that this metaphor that the rabbis have seized upon actually outlives those particular rabbis by a long shot, by centuries and millennia. The rabbis from 1,500 years ago, from the year 0 to 500 or so, they didn't know about crusades or the blood libel or the Inquisition or the Shoah. They didn't know about any of that. That wasn't part of their history. And yet, they have handed us this reflection on when Jewish community has faced deep horror, loss of life and community, but Judaism itself, well, in their rendering of it, couldn't uproot it. It regrew when it was cut. Its roots survived, and after it endured battering storms, it stood as tall as it ever did. But what I think is so powerful about this metaphor in particular is that it works not only communally, collectively, all of us here today in this way. It works on decades and centuries, over 5,000-ish years of Jewish history. But it works on a level that's highly personal and instructive. It actually really reverberates a lot in the world today. I promised we'd come back to air travel. I want to suggest, actually, that air travel is a remarkable barometer for some of the most profound difficulty that we find within our society today. Maybe some of you are aware that people are behaving worse on airplanes than they used to. Worse than when I was a kid. The FAA reports the worst year on record was 2021, with 5,973 documented incidences of bad passenger behavior. About 6,000, just shy. We've come down a little bit from that number. That's theorized to maybe be COVID-related, but we haven't actually gone back to the levels of air rage from before the pandemic. The average number before that was 900, and the last 3 years has been about 2,000. So that's about 6 incidents of air rage per day. Maybe that doesn't seem so bad. There's a lot of flights out there, right? But look at it this way. Commercial air travel started in 1914. When do you think the first documented incident of bad passenger behavior was on a flight? Not 1915. Did you have one? 1914. It wasn't 1914. 1947. Americans flew for 33 years, without a single documented incident of bad behavior. 33 years without misbehaving once. Now we've got about 6 per day. I don't know why collectively we behave the way that we do. I'm playing with these statistics around air travel, but I'm using that as a kind of stand-in, a kind of shorthand for what feels broken right now in the world. That people, it seems, are impatient. That people do not give one another the benefit of the doubt. That people may get up and assume the worst right from the get-go. That we're really quick to make one another our enemies over the slightest of perceived misbehaviors. Why has our behavior coarsened so much collectively? You can see it in the news, you see it on the internet, it's an obvious thing. I don't think I'm telling anyone here anything that they don't feel right now. That our collective public behavior is not stellar. Why is a good question. If any of the young people here today want to go out and get a PhD in sociology or cultural anthropology or something and answer this question authoritatively, I would love to read your paper. And I have ideas like in the back of my head. I have theories. I kick around different things, but I'm not an expert, and I can't stand here and definitively tell you why it is we treat each other the way that we do in the public sphere, and that it's looked a lot worse than it did 10 or 20 years ago. But while I can't fix that set of external circumstances, I want to suggest that Talmud has thought about how it is we show up to the encounter. Suppose air travel wasn't just this expression of bodily or spiritual autonomy or class conflict or whatever it was. Suppose it was just no big deal. No big deal. So here's the shift. It's the read. There are times when being the most unyielding totem of strength, as it turns out, is not going to help. It won't get the flight there any faster, and it may just get you removed from it. If you have the option between being firm, being aggressive, being strong, whatever else comes with it, resolute, like the cedar tree, but suppose you just chose not to. This isn't saying to abandon who you are or your integrity, but maybe not every circumstance or of unpleasantness from a stranger in traffic or somebody being obnoxious on an online message board requires the most vigilant of your defense. Back to the read. You can damage it without ever wrecking it at its core. The strength comes not actually from what's in front of your eyes, because what's in front of your eyes can be cut off and regrown, and what's in front of your eyes does not constitute the roots in which it lives. The strength comes from that part you don't see, that's underground, that's under the water. And it allows for a flexibility that strikes me as somewhat scarce in the world today, within our society. It's a question of whatever happened to live and let live, this idea that comes out of game theory called zero-sum interaction. Basically means if we're playing a game together, my gain is your loss. If I win $5 in a poker hand, that means somebody else or a combination of people have lost $5. No money materializes magically in this exchange. Your gain is someone else's loss, 1-to-1. But that synopsis of win and lose, I get where it does apply in certain circumstances, but here's the thing. Does it apply to pride? Does it apply to justice or justness? Do you have to be rhetorically or ideologically wrong for me to be right? There's an easy acceptance of this as a certain kind of values paradigm, this zero-sum game. And I don't think it's always correct. Think about the cedar tree. It stands or it doesn't. It meets the amount of physical force required to knock it down, or it doesn't. It prevails or it's destroyed. It's binary. But here's the thing, that view only looks at the cedar. It doesn't actually consider the broader ecosystem and everything around. It thinks about the tensile strength of this piece of wood, but the rabbinic view of the reed looks at it as existing in a different kind of balance with all of its surroundings. Ta'anit, that piece of Talmud, looks at when the rains don't fall and the winds don't blow. Sometimes the winds blow, sometimes the rains fall. Other times it's a lovely day, but the point is that these things are interconnected. The reed is able to go about what it does not in opposition to its environment, but in harmony with it, as part of it. Imagine you board Delta flight whatever, and the person in front of you leans back their seat. Do you adjust your tray table, or do you kick the back of it? Do you say something politely if you need help, or do you complain in one of those stage whisper voices that's really louder than like it needs to be so they can hear you in that way about what a terrible person they are? In other words, when the wind blows, do you sway, or do you find your own resolve? There are exceptions to this. There are times that you have to stand tall, don't get me wrong. But if we contrast living our lives as the cedar tree versus the reed, when does life call for you to be flexible? And when does it require your opposition? My 103-year-old grandfather, happy birthday to him as of Friday, always said that discretion is the better part of valor. He always told me that when I was a kid. Discretion is the better part of valor. Are you finding discretion in what blows against you, or are you looking to exercise valor? Are we as a Jewish people or as Americans finding places in which we can find a way of being with the ecosystem and sometimes the other, or are we scheming for how we can push them harder than they push us? My going theory here is that we're spending a great deal of our time spoiling for what is the right fight for us to take on. The anthropological history of human conflict is replete with this idea that there's not enough food or money or resource or whatever, that the world is actually zero-sum in that way. That's the way that it's constructed, and we have to be vigilant in defense of what is ours. I guess that's real, but where's the line between us and them? When everyone else is the other who is out to take what's yours? When are you the cedar concerned with tensile strength, and when are you the reed dwelling in a broader ecosystem when it's windy? I actually think this message to deliver right now is kind of countercultural right now. It feels different than a lot of, I don't know, what you might hear on the news or out in public discourse or social media. But I do believe there's a profound Torah to the cedar tree and the reed. The rabbis understood this. Being flexible, they said, is not a curse. Achia, the Shiloni, said, I curse the Israelites that they should be like the reed waving in the wind. And they said, nah. The rabbi said, how is it we Jews have actually survived for centuries, for thousands of years, even in their time, but even more thousands of years now? Did we survive it by being the most ferocious imperial presence the world has known? No. Are you going to get to your destination necessarily faster by causing a problem for the other people on the airline? No. So let us find strength when we need it. But let us also recognize when resilience and perseverance may actually have greater power than kinetic force. We shouldn't be seduced by the zero-sum thing, that overwhelming cultural prevalence of it, when it's us versus them and my loss is your gain. It's got a certain efficacy. It feels good in its simplicity. But oftentimes what feels good as a use of force against the other may not be the key to our life and to our survival. I'm not talking about my 40 years in this world, but I'm talking about our people's 5,000 years of existence. That kind of discernment has been key to our Jewish longevity. Tomorrow we're going to look at another element, another valence of the cedar and the reed. One that speaks to this business of how it is the rabbis took a curse and turned it into a blessing. And we'll be continuing with a little bit of this on Kol Nidre and Yom Kippur, how it sits with us in uniquely Jewish ways, and how it sits with us in our Jewish relationship to Israel in these times. Yesterday's blessing was that of the cedar tree, or as Moses said to Joshua, Chazak ve'amatz, strength from without and from within. Today's blessing has to do with that strength from within. May discretion indeed be the better part of valor. May our perseverance be nourished by our understanding of shared destiny and common purpose with others around us. May we find the wisdom to understand when it is we truly are required to fight, but when blowing in the wind, to quote Bob Dylan, it's not actually a curse, but it's a blessing. Shana Tova.